Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Bench with Neil Francis, the Cardiff Devils podcast that goes deep into the nostalgia of all things Cardiff Devils. And this week we have some really good heavy debate for you as we line up all of the possibles of the all-time Cardiff Devils team. I'm Gareth Hewish, and as always, I'm joined by Mr. John Donovan.
Good evening, everybody. Very pleased to be here, and no mention of Rick Rabant, of course, because of the 3-season rule.
There we go. We got it out of the way.
And we're joined by our very talented Mr. Producer Herbs.
Good evening. I did suggest a wild card so everyone could have one player nominated, but that would have been for 2 years. So again, Rick Rabant would not have been included.
And of course, the man on the marquee and the man who is in charge of this endeavour, Mr. Neil Francis. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm feeling the pressure now, aren't I? I'm going to get lots of hate mail from ex-teammates and stuff about why they didn't make the cuts. And yeah.
Todd did very much seem to put the shoulder on you that you're.
I put it straight in black and white. There's only one way the blame's coming. Yeah.
So let's talk through the rules.
Yeah. I was going to say it's been a tough week as it is because after the big revelation at the end of last podcast, I've been stood up.
Is he not?
No accepted.
Grant Morrow stood me up. Which I mean, I put it down to two things. Either he's a very busy man. I believe he's running a construction company in British Columbia, or he hates my guts because he might have listened to a couple of episodes. So it's one of the other ones, but as of now, I'm still in the promised land.
Has it been rejected, or has it just not been?
No. It's just leaving me hanging.
Okay, so there's still hope then.
I'm not giving up hope.
Sounds like my dating life.
JD, I think you're going to have to send a request in as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hope he has listened to the podcast and hates Franny, because at least we're getting some listeners.
Yeah, and we did say we were aiming to branch out to BC, didn't we? So.
We'll keep you updated with all of the latest One Punch news, as we have done for the last 18 months. So let's go through the rules for this endeavour.
No, sorry, before we do, guys, can I just ask? I went on the Inferno last night for the first time in years. I get grief about, he's going to nominate Rabant. You've mentioned One Punch on every episode. You don't get grief for any.
One Punch was a nice guy.
It's a good point. And I think I remembered the interpreter. It was Steve-O, wasn't it? The interpreter in Hungary. Remember? I forgot about
Steve-O.
him. But the pod needed characters, and that's what One Punch brings in. Long may we mention his name every week.
I still love Cannonball. Cannonball's an underrated character for me.
Hey, and that's a job for producer Hubs. If he could get footage of Cannonball, everybody could see what we're talking about.
Who's Cannonball? What have I missed?
Go back a few episodes, Hubs.
Did you not listen when you went on payroll?
No.
I'm
on payroll.
I'm a YouTuber.
That's why we brought Hubs on, so we could get one more listener.
Yeah.
There we go. It's paid off. Okay. The rules. Eventually, when the voting begins, you can vote for 6 players. 1 goalie, 2 defensemen, 3 forwards from each of the defined eras. The defined eras are thus: the first decade, 1986 to 1996. The second era is the Superleague era, running from 1996 to 2003. The third era is the first decade of the Elite League, running from 2003 to 2014. And the final fourth era is the Devils' new era, which runs from 2014 to the present. The criteria for selection. The player must have played for the Devils for at least 3 seasons. To clarify, this can be 3 seasons across a different era. So you may have started playing 95 and played 1 year, 95, 96, and then 2 years in the Superleague era. You would be eligible to be voted into one of those eras. Franny, have I got that correct?
Correct.
It's not the Ivan Matulik rule.
It's the Ivan Matulik rule.
Yeah, we've had the Rick Brabant rule, which is 1 season doesn't count.
But are we accepting Tyson Strachan, though, for Fee? I don't want to accept Fee.
Fee's got our own Devils all-time team. There's one player on it, and it's Tyson Strachan.
Episode done.
And the second criteria is that the player must have won at least 1 major title as a Devil, or been on the world record-setting team from 2010 to 2011. And just for clarity, the 2007 British Knockout Cup is being counted as a major trophy.
It was the one that everyone wanted to win that year, and we got it. It was actually, I think, harder to win that than it was the playoffs or maybe even the Challenge Cup. It was a long.
I don't think we played a home game during the entire competition.
It's probably the best trophy the club's ever won. Away final on Coventry Ice as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, shutout as well, I think. It
was 3-0.
Oh, well, there we go. It's let's not talk down the BK Cup.
So the all-time Devils team will eventually be 4 goalies, 8 defensemen, 12 forwards, and we will also name 2 coaches.
Okay, and this is something else that I want to let you know about. I'm not sure if you do. Shirt producer extraordinaire Andy Corcoran has got a design for this shirt, and we will be producing 2 shirts for every player that eventually gets selected into the team. So not the ones we nominate tonight, but when it goes out to the fans vote, and we'll talk about that in a second. When we get down to who is our all-time team of Devils, there will be 2 shirts. We will hopefully send them across to the player to get him to sign one and send it back, and the other one the player gets to keep as a little thank you from us. So those jerseys will then be up for grabs, and we'll give details, or Todd will give details, after the team's been picked on how the fans can get hold of that jersey.
Franny, is it true that the actual prototype jersey is a 93 Brabant jersey, one prototype, especially for John to bid on?
It's got strawberries over it as well.
Absolutely happy days.
All the money in the world.
And it should be stressed that when the voting does open, you're not bound to vote in every era. If you've only been a relatively new fan, you can just vote for your favourites from this era. If you're long in the tooth, like all of us, then you can vote in every era, of course. But let's get cracking. The first decade of the Cardiff Devils, 1986 to 1996. Let's throw it over to you, Franny. Let's have some of the potential nominees.
Yeah, and obviously I'm going to need John's memory bank for this. But, I mean, the goalies themselves, and this is where it's already going to start to get complicated in terms of which era do you put guys across. But a lock-in for a nomination from me for one of the goalies has got to be Wembley hero Jeff Smith. Mm-hmm. Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
And then you got the other 2 considerations then are Jason Wood, who I think in the 1991-92 season, because he came as a youngster before that, I think he was very young, but then that 1991-92 season, he split the games pretty much with Jeff, obviously showed his potential, and then took over as number 1 the next year. And the following 2 seasons, we won the double-double, didn't we? League and playoff.
Grand Slam, 92,
Grand Slam. Yeah, Grand Slam 92, 93, and then the double in 93, 94. So you can't underestimate Jason Wood. And then this era also saw the debut of Stevie Lyle, who came in that 94 season. That's when we were out in Europe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Woody ends up getting knocked out
by Kip Noble.
By Kip Noble, slap shot in the head. We might mention Kip Noble in another era, but we may. So he gets knocked out. Then Stevie Lyle comes in, performs heroics, and then goes on, against the Russian teams and was just unbelievable, wasn't he? And then what a career then Stevie Lyle had. So, I mean, I think this is our first debating point already, quite early doors, is who gets that second goalie spot. Because for me, Jeff Smith is a lock-in. Yeah. Wembley hero.
And then Jason Wood get the first ever shutout in Wembley as well.
Yes, he
in
did.
Playoffs,
After also getting a shout out at Wembley as a member of the England team years before. Woody's listening here. Frank, I think you make a great point, Frank. I think it would be easy just to say Smith and Lyle. I think Hubs recognises that he got a shutout against Murrayfield in a 9-0 playoff semi-final on the Friday night, and that was unheard of, as you know, Franny. And
Murrayfield always had that high potent first line, didn't they? Tony Hand,
and then they had Hand, they
Palmer,
had Palmer.
Just Palmer. Yeah, what a line!
So to get a shutout at Wembley was something, huge. So, and also, he won a Grand Slam, and we've only won the Grand Slam once. So, and then you go into Stevie Lyle, and I know Stevie kind of qualifies because he goes across the years, but I'm a Devils and a City fan, and I was thinking of this across my two sports today. If Cardiff City had maybe won the FA Cup in 2008, where they were in the final, what have you, maybe this would have been different. But I think probably the greatest kind of sporting fairy story I've ever seen was Stevie Lyle as a 14-year-old winning player of the tournament in the European Cup.
I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say Stevie Lyle as a 14-year-old getting into Winston's nightclub.
That I grew a moustache early.
Well, he did have a big beard at 14. Yeah.
So
when he tried to lie about his age, he'd been all over the papers as this 14-year-old schoolboy prodigy, and the bouncers weren't having any of it. Anyway, sorry, I did break you off in your track.
No. But I just think that I was just thinking about it today and thinking I'm not sure in my two sporting teams are the Devils and Cardiff City, and I'm not sure there's a better fairy tale story than the Stevie Lyle one in that European Cup. And then, Jeff Smith, you guys know when you kindly kind of indulged me to do the 1990 Wembley episode, just how much that means to me. So in this era, it was the goalies that were really the biggest debate for me. I must admit, if I was a fan and I was voting, and I know, Franny, I'm not sure if we're allowed to do this or not, I would vote for Smith because of Wembley 90. But I think I think Woody's, it's hard to rule out a netminder who's shut out at Wembley and won a Grand Slam.
Yeah. And I think as Stevie Lyle comes up in two other eras, such as his sort of longevity, I think that we park Stevie Lyle for now and we put in Jeff Smith, Jason Wood. So they'll go out to the vote, yeah. If
Gaz, I know you were less around at this time, although following them, but Hubs, you were very much there. Would you?
100%. So Jeff Smith was the first standout goalie of the club who raised the bar of British netminding, and then obviously Woody came in as that young face and served the club from that point. And had a great career with the club as well, and brought an athleticism that hadn't been seen to netminded at that point. I understand.
And painted goalie masks as well.
And painted goalie with the woodpecker.
Woodpecker, yeah.
But they're the two. When you look at that era and you look back at the memories, you look back at the videos from those times. Those are the two for me.
All right. Something you should say about the goalie mask is that my first game was 1995, and as I first came into the rink, that's the first thing I saw in warm-up was the Woody Woodpecker mask. And I remember thinking, how cool is this? I've never seen this in any other sport. So really, remember that mask in some way?
It's iconic.
Probably started my fandom even before I saw Mike Way and thought, that's the coolest thing about it.
Yeah, and we must go on because we got 4 eras to talk about in total. But whenever I think of Woody and Woody Woodpecker on his mask, there's those credits of, was it like the Sky TV show, and there's Woody like showing the mask up close. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, they flash up on the flashbacks that I always enjoy watching every Friday night or whatever it is.
Yeah,
so
who does those? Sorry, I just want to give credit. I don't know who the guy is, Eagles.
It's One Punch. It's One Punch with this production company. No, I don't know who it is. We're not going to name them because they don't name themselves. They're down as Ice something 8 on YouTube.
Eagles 8. So I think they played for the Cardiff Eagles rec ice hockey team.
Yeah,
so
but they do a hell of a job bringing back some nostalgia. Love that. Anyway, let's move on. We got some defense to sort out. I mean, to be honest, I think the 2 guys, and we don't want to obviously sway the fan vote, but the 2 guys in this era that are absolute standouts speak for themselves. Shannon Hope, Stephen Cooper, the finest pairing in the whole league for many, many a year. And you could argue that you could put them in any era, and that would be a top D pairing. It had a bit of everything, didn't it? It had the flash of shiny, all the spinner armors, all that kind of stuff. But gritty as well, tough when he had to be.
Absolutely.
And then Stephen Cooper, best British defenseman, hands down. There's an argument to say he was the most influential British player ever, including Tony Hand, because of the amount of trophies that Stephen Cooper won. And obviously, in partnership with his brother Ian, that we'll talk about in the forwards. But Stephen Cooper, what a player.
Completely agree. I think Stephen Cooper was a Rolls Royce in that. Mike O'Connor always said, and Mike O'Connor obviously tied up with Sheffield Steelers and a great servant of British ice hockey. He always said when he played with Stephen Cooper in Durham, it was having an extra import. That's why whoever had Stephen Cooper and Ian as well, that's where the trophies went. That's why you won the league, because it was like having 2 more imports in a limited import league. And then Shannon Hope, I've always got a soft spot for Shannon because he was my first ever kind of favorite player, because I just, when you're going to nickname Shannon the Cannon, when I'm a kid, I can't help but like a guy called Shannon the Cannon, and just his skating ability. He was tough, Franny. Boy, could Shannon fight when he wanted to. He was a tough guy, but he was silky. He was a great clubman. He was maybe the first really big Cardiff Devils clubman. Obviously, Lawless started and what have you, but Shannon always had time for kids like me and what have you. So Shannon still is a bit of a hero. So Stephen Cooper and Shannon Hope. Yeah.
To this day, if I speak to someone that's not like a follower of the ice hockey, but they find out that I've been involved in the ice hockey, there's one name that comes up more often than not. Is like, I used to know someone involved in the ice hockey, and it's Shannon.
Yeah.
And we're talking. I should have said at the start, when we're talking about this Devils all-time team, there may be players who are better players, outright. However, we are looking for the players that contributed the most to the club. So there's players that contributed the most. And when you look at Shannon's overall package in terms of being that character, like you say, John, the first character of the Devils, a name that's hanging from the rafters, a name that is still known and talked about today. Bought into everything Cardiff, and even just for his interviews at the end when we won something, him and Bob Humphreys had a little thing going on, didn't he? So that was great. Yeah. So the tough bit now, and it's after the Lord's Mayor parade. Who makes up our alternative picks? I feel sorry for these guys because they haven't got much chance. But
I think they respect that, Franny. I think any of the guys that played with Cooper and Hope, because of the minutes they played and because of what they did, I don't think. Hey, you were in the locker room with them, Franny, so you can speak. But a guy like Paul Heavey, who went on to be a superb coach for Cardiff Devils as well, and I think Paul Heavey would probably honestly defer to Shannon Hope and Stephen Cooper and say, hey, they were our guys.
Yeah. And of course, you had also in this era, I've got down Jason Stone and Mike Ware.
Yeah.
Both of them also flip into the next era. And there's probably a bigger shout for them in the next era. But all right, if we're going to go with a 4, let's go in with Paul Heavey and
I like it. It's a hard one, that fourth one. I know he was part of the Grand Slam winning team. I like Derek King. I think Derek King had a hard time. He had to come in and beat Stephen Cooper, basically. He wasn't. I like Derek King. And a guy you grew up with, Franny, Lee Carson was a guy who came through the ranks and did well at the Devils, and he was on a double winning team. So, he gets shouts as well. So I'm happy to leave this fourth pick to you, Franny, in terms of who you think was maybe had the greatest story on the ice, but also was good in the locker room. I think Cooper Hope Heavey as a fan, and I don't know, Hubs again.
I would lean, if the names mentioned though thus far, I probably lean towards someone like Derek King.
And he did win something last, didn't he? He won that 1992 Grand Slam. Yeah. All right, let's go Derek King. Sorry, Cass, but that's just swayed me. The Grand Slam, Derek King, replacing Stephen Cooper in that, was it? Yeah. No, were they on the same team? Were they on the same team?
They were the last season, because the Coopers came back to the Grand Slam. But I always felt a bit sorry for Heavey and King, because they had to come in to replace essentially the Coopers. And
he was young too, wasn't he? He was still in his cage.
And I think he made a good fist of it. And I think with Derek King, Steve Moria rated him as a player, and I think if Steve Moria rates somebody, that's good enough for me. That's
a good yardstick, isn't it? Yeah. All right, there we go. There's our four. Again, in the forwards, there's a little bit more debate, but that one line through the decade, Steve Moria, Doug McEwen, Ian Cooper, it had everything, didn't he?
Yep.
Didn't it? Steve Moria, probably the smoothest player that we've ever had to play for us. Effortless in everything that he did, oozed class in everything, and again, longevity with the club. A lock in for me. Doug McEwen, he's not called God for no reason. Some of the things that he did on that ice were just amazing, and you can't help get that vision of Rocky Stagenuck, who played in the NHL, chasing him around the net when Doug turned back and did a loop around his own net before going coast to coast, and then putting the puck up the net. So Doug McEwen, again, a guy that's ingrained in Devils history, and Ian Cooper, quite often his role gets a little bit underestimated because of his brother.
Yes.
But, I'm sure if you spoke to Steve Moria, Doug McEwen, the guys that played with him, he made their job so much easier. He was the first guy to make that office in front of the net where he parked himself in front, made a nuisance of him, opened up room for his line mates, took so many beatings, cross checks in the back, still went back for more. And that line had everything. Probably the best balanced line I've seen.
Completely agree, Freddie. My favourite line in Cardiff Devils history, and there have been some great ones, and I think you summed it up perfectly. Just two things for me to say, just to add to that. Franny, you coined the phrase that Joey Martin is the greatest of all time, and I wouldn't argue with that. I think the second greatest of all time is Steve Moria, and that's despite my love of Rick Brabant, but he did only play one season for the Devils. I think in terms of Devils history, I think Joey Martin is just above Steve Moria. For me, I don't think anybody, saw the ice quite as well as Steve Moria, could play make like Steve Moria. Just a joy to watch. And even at 83 years old, which he is now, I think he could still make a team. Doug McEwen, as you rightly say, just poetry, emotion. It was interesting in the Wembley 90 episode, the guy saying they didn't always know what Dougie was going to do. Maybe he didn't either, but it was pretty special. And I'm really glad you mentioned Ian Cooper, because as a young kid watching him take a beating in front of the net, and I remember the year we won the double, 1990, Murrayfield had two big defensemen, Steve Moore and Brian McKee, and they kicked, I won't swear, they kicked hell out of Ian Cooper, but Ian Cooper would not be moved. And ultimately, we were in a shootout with Murrayfield for the league title, and I think Ian Cooper made a huge difference in I think we won the games against Murrayfield, so won the league title, and Ian Cooper gave them hell. And I think Ian Cooper, I think Ian, and I don't think you'd mind me saying this, he didn't want to leave Cardiff. So as a result, maybe he doesn't always talk about Cardiff as affectionately as he might, because he feels bitter that he had to leave. But I know deep down that Ian Cooper, loved being a Cardiff Devil, and I loved watching Ian Cooper.
Yeah. Okay, for our next three forwards in this era, and I think when I looked through the list, there were three standouts to go on our sort of selection. One's the man himself, John Lawless. Came in, founded the club. If there's not a role for him as a player, then I'm sure we're going to find a role for him on this Devils all-time team when we start talking about the coaches, management. But yeah, even as a player though, that that little deke, and then he went across and threw that wrist shot top shelf, shooting the scoreboard. He was just a young kid when he came in and set this whole program up, and knew how to kind of win over the fans straight away. He brought entertainment. It wasn't just sport; it was entertainment. Great player in his own right. Very hard to play against. Next one I've got is a Welsh guy, probably the first Welsh guy to make it as a high-level player. Obviously won the Young British Player of the Year award, Nicky Chin. Mm-hmm. And again, played on until he was 40. But he went out there, made himself big and strong. He was great physique and very, very skillful as well. And, in the years where we were accused of all the checkbook hockey and stuff like that, all of a sudden we had a second line with Jason Stone and Nicky Chin on it, and we were winning stuff with that as a second line. So they were homegrown players. So that was a huge achievement. And then the sixth player then I've got for selection, and feel free if you can think of any more, is Hilton Ruggles, who was with us for the 3 years. Yeah. He put up a 100-goal season.
Yeah.
I don't care how different the hockey was back then. You've still got to put up 100 goals. And the thing about Hilton is that he didn't even bother trying in the games where it was a shoe-in for us to win. Yeah. He just literally could not be bothered. He wouldn't skate. But in the big games, when you needed your goal scorer, that was his forte. He came out and he put the goals. So he put those 100 goals away in big games only because he just did not try against the lesser teams.
And 40 of those 100 goals, Franny, was short-handed. You don't get the name short-handed. No, I would agree. I think, Jason Stone will probably come into another era. He gets an honourable mention for me. Jason Stone, a real intrinsic part of that second line with McEwen and Chin. And I remember the job Jason Stone did on Neil Smith, the fight at Wembley, when Lawless gave him a specific job. Jason Stone, real team guy. But Chinny was really the first Cardiff superstar, and that was cool to see. And we kind of remember him from the Grand Slam year on and the Mike Rowe punch and that sort of thing. I remember him from 1991 when again we'd lost the Coopers, and that's a big hole to fill. And Neil Brown and Peter Smith came in, and they're great guys. I've met both of them. They're fantastic guys off the ice and on the ice. They did a great job for the Cardiff Devils, but they weren't Ian Cooper, and neither of them quite matched with Moria and McEwen. And Hilton Ruggles, the whole branding of that French connection with Steve Cadieux. We'd had Grattan, we'd had Anderson. Unfortunately, they hadn't worked out. We just lost Moria, who were going to be our star imports. And Cadieux came in, and obviously, like Brabant, only played one season, but was pretty damn good. But Ruggles played 3 seasons, and that guy loved to win. As you say, Franny, in the big games, he played hard. He was a tough guy. He could play in the corners, and that wicked kind of quick release he had just would beat a goalie. And
that's because the curve on his stick was literally like that. He didn't know where it was going, so the goalie had no chance.
Goalie had no idea. I always remember that Benson Hedges Cup final when he bent the stick back when he had the call on him for illegal equipment on the stick. But Franny, I can't really argue with you, and I don't know whether Hub would put anyone else in. I would second all your picks for that forward line.
And I just want to add something to the actual Chinny debate. Obviously, you got the likes of Hilton and John would have been developed from kids over in Canada. For Chinny to develop how quick he actually developed as a British player without a background in skating, because there was no even rink, the work he must have done. Yes, you can have the physique and stuff, but to develop his skating to the standard he got it to be able to do that was phenomenal. That's taking kids now, obviously training from 6 to 8 now through the junior development. Chinny didn't have that. Stoney didn't have that. But to get to the level he got to was absolutely phenomenal, and he deserves all the credit in the world for that.
Yeah.
Yep. Here. Well, right. Okay. That's our first era done. Jeff Smith, Jason Wood, Shannon Hope, Stephen Cooper, Paul Heavey, Derek King, Steve Moria, Doug McEwen, Ian Cooper, John Lawless, Nicky Chin, Hilton Ruggles.
Agreed.
Okay. Let's go on. The Super League. This is where it gets tough. It's a little bit barren in the Super League because you had chopping and changing rosters, didn't you? So you don't have that many people like that meet the 3-season rule, and then there were only 2 trophies won during this era, which was the very first Super League title, and then the playoff title in 1999, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Franny, before we finish that previous era, and I know you said we couldn't do this, I want to give a shout out to you. You know, you've been in every era. You've been in every era. You started, I always remind you, I remember that goal on face-off against Whitley Warriors in 92, 93. That was the first goal I ever saw you score. You've been in every era. So I know it's going to embarrass you, but I think we couldn't let this pass without giving a little bit of a special mention to Neil Francis.
Special category.
Yeah. Persistence. Hung around.
Devil's legend.
Oh, thank you very much, JG. Much appreciated. And swiftly on.
Yeah, but to the Super League,
the Super League.
We touched. I think because of the hockey type there was more the players would be coming in and out. Was that professional money and teams wanted to win? So there was more chopping and changing than there was before, and than what there is now, because you build your backbone of your club over years now. So this is why the ISL era is going to be quite a tricky one for players who are fitting the criteria.
Yeah, 2 trophies only, and not many 3-year guys. So we talked about him in the first era when he started cutting his teeth. Stevie Lyle comes in as a goalie in our Super League era. And I think the only other goalie that qualifies, arguably the best goalie ever to play for the club, played 4 seasons, Derek Kolofsky.
Yeah.
Agreed on both those points.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think there are only choices, but wow, what a head-to-head that is. That's a tough pick. That's a tough pick. It's a nice pickup, but it's a tough pick.
Yes.
They haven't even got a helmet designed to separate them either.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to our defense. The first guy I've got written down. Maybe you should. I'll say the first guy I got written down. We talked about him earlier, where his slap shot, which he was known for, knocked out Jason Wood and launched Stevie Lyle's career. But Kip Noble, I've got in there. 4 years with the Devils. He was in both of those trophy-winning sides. A premier offensive defenseman. Very competitive. I think Kip Noble's got to be in there with a nomination.
I'd agree. I saw comments today, which I didn't necessarily disagree with, that maybe he was the first guy whose offensive side was better than his defensive side, but his compete level.
Yeah, I didn't think he was terrible defensively, because he was such a competitor. So yes, he was more offensively minded. Yeah, but he was also tough to play against. He was intense.
I always remember he was intense, and he played bigger than his size. Yeah. And he could play minutes, and he gives me hope, Franny, because he looked like he was in the physical condition I am now when I play 5-a-side football with you. But at the same time, he was hell of a player, and he was one of those players that excited you if you were a fan. You were on the ice, Franny. I was in the stands, and when Kip Noble was on the ice, and when Kip Noble was making a coast to coast rush, he excited me. So I think Kip Noble would get one of my picks.
I also love the fact that every sort of bit of media thought he was Dutch Canadian because he played in Holland. So he was always on his captions, Dutch Canadian Kip Noble, and there'd be interviews. So Kip, you're Dutch Canadian, and he'd just be like, nope. No. And he would just make the interviewer feel about this big. So
Did he ever try to do a Steve McLaren-esque accent? That would have been great.
Again, to John's point of what he read on the forum the other day, and this is where you're picking teams like this, it's easy when you look at a guy in isolation, but when you're forming teams, you're looking at the chemistry of who you would have played with and so forth and so on. So yes, you could say Kip is more offensively talented, but Kip Noble is a premier ISL defenseman. There's no doubt about that, and would deserve to be on the list.
I also, sorry, just very quickly, Franny, before you go on, because I know we're rushing through. I think we need to put the Super League into context. I think maybe the last 3 years of the Elite League were on a par, probably maybe better than the Super League. But for the 35 years we're talking about as this Cardiff Devils hockey, that Super League chunk of years, whoever played in that team and particularly whoever played in that championship winning team in 96-97, you could class as probably, the best Devils players of all time, arguably.
Well, I'd just like to, as a comparison, we've just talked about Hilton Ruggles. In 94-95, had 157 points from 44 games in the British Heineken League. Only 2 years later, Hilton's playing for Manchester Storm in the first year of the Superleague, and he gets 27 points from 41 games.
Goes back to Vez's point from the other podcast. Remember Vez's point in the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and that's exactly it. It was chalk and cheese.
Yeah. Okay, so we got to get some more D-men in here. So there's one guy, Gaz, you mentioned him earlier as somebody that sort of ignited your passion for the game, and he was box office. Mike Ware, big Mike Ware. I remember playing for him against Murrayfield, and it was scary because you just did not know what he was going to do, and it would Keats took the most of the rap because he would always do something stupid and Mike would lose his mind. I remember him shooting a puck at Keats, and they ended up becoming really good friends. But he was scary to play against, and then we got him. And my God, did you feel much better having Mike Ware on your side than against you? And to be honest, against anybody, because you could just be as big as brave as you wanted because Mike Ware was on your roster. So Mike Ware, I think, is a strong contender here for the shortlist.
I think he is, Franny. I think, I'm sorry, guys. I want to come in with my first controversial point because I like to think now I'm the guy, having read a few comments, I'm the guy on the podcast who's hated, so I might as well be an arsehole. which plays well to my strengths. Mike Ware is a Devils legend. In terms of Super League, I think he was great at Murrayfield in that limited import league. In terms of Super League and beyond, I preferred Mike Ware as a forward than a defenseman because I think Mike Ware's foot speed wasn't great. So while I classify Mike Ware as a Devils legend, I wouldn't necessarily say his defense was his best position as a Cardiff Devil.
I liked him better as a D-man.
There we go. And I bow to you because you're a player.
I
liked him better when he was on the bench and not causing me any trouble.
No, when he was kicked out of the game, you liked him better. Yeah. But as a D-man, because he had that big long reach, I felt he was really hard to get around. And then
I just had concerns about his foot speed.
Yeah.
When he got his reach.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah. Okay, so Mike Ware's up for consideration. We're not locking him in yet. Again, another guy we've talked about. You don't play 20 years to the Devils without coming into the vote. Jason Stone, 20 years for the same team. And he'll play it down and say, oh, it's just because I'm from Cardiff, whatever. No, he played through all these eras, didn't he? And he adapted from being a very steady forward who was nice to play with because he did all the unselfish things. Stephen Cooper gets injured, ACL injury, and Stoney's got to quickly convert into a D-man. And we talked about how good Stephen Cooper was, but we managed without him by having Jason Stone on D. And that's unbelievable versatility that he then sort of carried on through his career and, adapted his game. The older he got, he kind of just, we always talked about him as the goalie's best friend because he was always there to clean up the mess. I tell you what, other defensemen loved being partners with Stoney. They really enjoyed it. A lot of them had their best years playing with him because he was happy to sit back and let someone like a Bergie do his bit. And Jason Stone. I mean, you'll know better than me, John, how many league titles and playoffs, but it's a lot that he's won, and the BK Cup.
His trophy collection is huge, Franny, and I just think, as a fan, and correct me if I'm wrong, Franny as a player, and Hubs, you were on the ice as an official, Jason Stone, we've had three great British defensemen. You had in the first era, you had Stephen Cooper, and I think you had Jason Stone, and now we've got Mark Richardson. And I look at Stone, and I don't think he was the fastest skater in the world, and I don't think he was the biggest player in the world. So to me, that means his hockey IQ and what he did on the ice was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And I think you really look at the Super League as well. You look at the run into the title, and he scores that big goal against Sheffield as well. It's not like he was a passive Super League.
Absolutely, guys.
Player. He's not just in the background. He's contributing in all kinds of different ways, and that goal is pretty iconic in the terms of that title run.
Yeah.
And he's playing high up on the lines where if you're a British player in that era, you were normally a forward. The responsibility of being a British defenseman, you had to be a lot better than you just had to be an absolute standout. You couldn't be mediocre.
Yeah, we weren't rolling 5D in Super League. We rolled 6D. I think if memory serves, it was Hope and Evans. I think it was Pope and Noble. And I think it was Stoney and Mike Ware. So I think Stoney was taking regular shifts.
And
definitely.
His IQ, his positioning, I think he got it from man marking Rick Brabant when he was at Durham in all those games. But his hockey IQ and positioning and his desire. There's one thing that sums up Stoney is his actually desire and his will to win.
Okay, and then we've got, for my fourth suggestion, is a guy, I mentioned him on the I think the Scaldi podcast because they played together, but a very, very solid player, pound for pound, one of the toughest about. Played for us for I think 6 years, Frank Evans. Again, probably one of those that his teammates appreciated him more than maybe casual fans.
Yeah,
but people that saw him week in, week out just knew how good he was. He's a very good all-round player and gave you that steal at the back.
Yeah, I love Frank Evans. I remember, again, a very young fan coming in, seeing someone the size of Mike Ware and being sort of in awe. But I distinctly remember the first time I saw Frank Evans drop the gloves. I remember thinking, so you don't need to be 6 foot and 280 pounds to make a difference with your gloves off. And sort of from there, it kind of gave me an appreciation of that type of defenseman, that hard-nosed, sort of gritty defenseman. And, it was always a shame. I always thought that it didn't work out when he came back in our Elite League year. But I think absolutely 100% worthy of being on this Super League list.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing, just to point out, that Heavey made a choice in 97, 98 to replace McEwen and Hope as alternate captains, and Evans got one of the A's. So I just assumed that's because he was kind of loved by his teammates in terms of what he did. So I always assumed Frank Evans was a great team guy. Yeah,
definitely. And there was no bigger members of the Frank Evans fan club than myself and James Manson. We used to get so excited when we knew he was going to scrap. Because and we'd always bug him about it too. We're like, Evo, you did this and that, and he'd always just kind of be really kind of almost very humble about it. But we always used to big him up and watch him sort of cringe a bit. But there we go. So that's 4 we got in there: Kip Noble, Mike Ware, Frank Evans, Jason Stone.
They're forwards.
Okay, our last guest, Vezio Sacratini, came in as a trialist. Me and Vez always joke about it, the greatest walk-on in sports history, that he came in as a trialist and walked on the team, and from third line, I think was our top scorer that year, maybe. We talked enough about him on the last podcast and everything that he brought, and what a fantastic servant. And again, you can tell when he was telling us how passionate he is about his time in Cardiff. So I think Vezio Sacratini is a very strong contender. The next one I got down is the guy that we voted as the greatest captain of Devils history, Mr. Ivan Matulak, who we'll hopefully have on at some point in the future when schedules allow. So Ivan Matulak, again, part of that. We talked off camera about Ken Hodge and what sort of classy player he was, but he didn't play the 3 seasons. But that line with Hodgie, Ivan Matulak, and the next name I've got down, Steve Thornton.
I think this guy
Steve Thornton came in.
I just think Steve Thornton is one of the most underrated players in Devils history. He never gets talked about. I know you're just about to, but he never gets talked about in the same breath as Devils legends. I think Steve Thornton as a puck-handling, skating forward, and what he went on to do then in Sweden and then came back. I think Steve Thornton was one of the best players I watched as a Cardiff Devil.
Yeah, he had a weird style, didn't he? I remember because we signed him midway through the first year. He'd started off the year maybe in Germany or somewhere, and then we signed him. And I remember I was getting a lot of ice time up to that point, and then they brought in another forward, so I got bumped down to the fourth line, which I became very accustomed to. But yeah, so Thornton's come in, and I watched him in the first practice, and I remember thinking, it's all right, I think I got him here, because he looked really like choppy, and he had this tiny stick. It was up to his waist, it was like a golf club, and really choppy. He never looked like he had control of the puck, and he ended up putting it in the back of the net. And then the next drill came, and same thing. He's chopping, he's fighting with his puck, and he's put it in the net there, but I think he's got a bit lucky. And then he did it again and again, and then we go into the games, and he's doing it week in, week out. And he, like we say, he was class. He just had a very unorthodox style, but as a goal scorer, a smart player, not the biggest guy, but he was robust enough to kind of take the checks, and a big competitor. And he, again, I think was on both those title-winning teams, wasn't he, in this era? And, one of the finest right wings to play for the Devils.
Agreed.
Now, this is where it gets a bit tougher to nominate our supplement players for the vote. Ian McIntyre.
I had him on my list.
Ian McIntyre's on my list.
4 years with the Devils. When he first came in, he got a bit of stick from the fans. I don't think anyone was overly impressed, because I think up to then, when you go back to the Kaju's and the Ruggles, and you got that flash, but then the hockey was so much worse back then than it was here. And Ian McIntyre was probably one of the first role players to come into the Devils, where he'd been used to playing in the EIHL, I think it was, in the American League, and he was there to go in, hit bodies, chip pucks in, fight when he had to, and boy could he fight! Unbelievably tough. But then he really, really grew on the fans' end, didn't he, over the next sort of 3 years, and he became very, very well respected around the league. So I think Ian McIntyre is definitely worthy of a mention in this.
Hugely. I loved Ian McIntyre. Speaking as a fan, I thought his first season, I've got to be honest, I thought he was going to be cut, because it was the second year of Superleague. We were only playing 3 lines, and we had Sacratini and McCarthy, and we were rotating Uchuk and McIntyre for the first half of the season, and neither of them were particularly playing well. And I didn't get what Ian McIntyre brought. So that whole first season, I thought, was a bit of a write-off. The next 3, he was unbelievable. He was strong. He would hit anything that moved, but he could skate. He could score goals. And I remember that year when he was with Moria and Simeone. And I know, when you're with Steve Moria, you're going to look good anyway. But I really liked McIntyre. He created room for Moria, and Moria could just see the ice then. And he could fight. I think if you go back to, what was it, episode 3, Gaz, and our list of fighters, I think Ian McIntyre, did he make it onto the Mount Rushmore? If not, he got an honourable mention. I loved Ian McIntyre. But you're right, Franny, that first season, I was one of those guys in the stand that thought he should be cut.
I think Franny hit the nail completely on the head. He was in that transition between the leagues and the styles. He was the first really true role player, power forward, who wasn't going to score the amount of goals that some of the bigger power forwards used to score about 3-4 years ago. But the style of the hockey was changing, that you needed someone like an Ian McIntyre, and he became pivotal to the teams. And there's reasons why we know in the fan base there's fans of certain types of players. Glenn, for example, loves his power forwards, and when you hear him talk about, when the first people he'll talk about is Ian McIntyre, and it's for those reasons, and the reasons why Cardiff loved those blue collar type players, and he was a great guy as well, great to boot.
There we go. Okay, so moving on from those 4 guys, this is where it gets tough for our next 2 picks. So I'm going to throw in Merv Priest.
Merv was on my list.
Merv the Swerve.
I mean, he did cut short his 3rd season with us to, I think that's when he maybe retired to join the police. Well, he didn't retire, did he? Because he went into the lower leagues then. But he went sort of into a career. But I mean, Merv's a good friend of mine, and we always rib him, Keats, Manson, and I, about how bad we used to think he was when he was at Murrayfield. we thought he was just this Canadian kid that's come over, and because he had a passport, they were playing him because they had no other players. Because we thought he looked really awful, like really awkward, and we used to I think in games we used to chirp him all the time. And then all of a sudden he goes to like Basingstoke, was it, under Peter Woods, who just absolutely loved him, and he ends up like leading the league and scoring. We're like, this is not the same Merv Priest. But when you got to play with Merv, you realised how super smart he was, and very, very underrated talent.
That's why he's on my list. Sorry.
And if we're talking trophies, are we including that Merv single-handedly won the second leg of the Devils versus Steelers Legends game in Cardiff in the 10th?
He did.
Therefore,
he still had it, yeah.
Yeah. And he basically won the second leg, therefore winning the game. So are we counting that as a trophy as well?
That's a big my team, so yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say.
yeah. JD, that's when you come in for coach of the all-time. Yeah.
But no, that's why Merv's on my list, because sort of until your hockey watching becomes a little bit more sophisticated, you don't really pay attention to the opposition. But Merv Priest was always someone who, when we played against, I'd come away from a game and I'd have noticed his influence on the game when he, especially at that time of Basingstoke. So when we signed him, I was delighted. It's fine to get to cheer a few goals instead of ruining my Sunday night before going to school on the Monday.
A unique name. Have you got anyone else that comes into this?
I've got Doug McCarthy on mine, on the basis that his third season was as a coach before leaving. So I don't know if he qualifies, but
I think we're going to have to, just to stretch it out to the 6 players. And then on my 6. So if we're not duplicating across nominees from other eras, we've got Vez, Ivan, Thornton, McIntyre, Merv, and Doug McCarthy makes us 6. So they're all. I'm just going to recap. Okay, Super League era, including 2002, 2003 BNL. We've got Stevie Lyle, Derek Kolofsky. What a duo in goal. We've got Kip Noble. We got Mike Ware. We got Frank Evans. We got Jason Stone. We got Vezio Sacratini, Ivan Matulak, Steve Thornton, Ian McIntyre, Merv Priest, Doug McCarthy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Let's go. Right. 2003, 2004 to 2013, 2014 inclusive. Yeah. Okay. Again, we're struggling a bit on the goalie front, aren't we?
Well, there's only 2 I've got.
Yeah, I've already got.
And one of them's already been picked.
Yeah.
So we've got, and again,
help people.
Well,
I've got 2 others.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so our BK Cup, and that's not Burger King. That is British Knockout Cup. Winning goalie is Phil Ozair.
Yeah.
Who fantastic goalie. It didn't quite work out in his last season with us when he came back to us. I don't think he was a big fan of the compact BBT. And I think having played the couple of seasons or 2 or 3 seasons before in Norway on the huge ice, he struggled massively with the different angles, didn't he? I remember he kept on, like, there was pucks going in from weird angles on him. And that was just like the compact nature. And he struggled to readjust from that. And that season was an absolute gong show anyway. But in the first spell with us, for me, he's up there with Holofsky, and Bounds as, our best ever goalie.
I would actually go as far as, for my opinion as a fan, I think he's the second best netminder who plays for Devils.
First being Ian Wright. Oh, Derek.
Ian Wright, yeah. Mike Keller.
John Paul Guy.
It was the British Cup semi-final, actually, where we played in Ice Sheffield against the Steelers, and Osea made a pad save that basically stopped the game from getting tied. But it is the best reaction pad save I've ever seen, and it got me out of my seat. And it was kind of that, when you kind of know you're going to win a competition based on one of almost like a derby fight or something like that. As soon as that happened, I just felt like, yeah, that's our competition.
And I think in general, Phil Ozair gave you confidence as a team that you had a chance to win every single night.
Yeah.
You know, he was consistent. He was, great goalie and even better person.
Yeah.
That still leaves us one goalie short. So, Gaz, I'm very intrigued to see who you
I
got.
am.
Well, I was as well until
Like Brabham.
I realised that Peter Aubrey only played 2 years.
So,
and thus
I
he
think
is not eligible.
So does Joe Myers come in?
Joe Myers
comes
Greatest
in.
DJ in the world.
Yeah, every good team needs a
Great
good
team
room
guy.
DJ. Yeah, I think Jared Adams mentioned it on when they were doing the draft, and he's like, Finnan
Joe
needs
Myers
to draft Joe Myers #1. Every room needs a good room DJ, and DJ Dead Puck is as good as they come.
Can I just so Joe Myers doesn't get just a cursory mention? The first game, and Gaz, I'd always bow to you and Alid on this, but the first game I ever got to commentate as the main commentator was against Nottingham in that horrible season for us. But I think Nottingham won the league title that year, and we beat Nottingham with Joe Myers in goal because we had an injury. And I've still got that DVD. And Joe Myers was fantastic that night. So let's be honest, Joe Myers is probably not going to win that vote. But when Joe Myers was called upon, Joe Myers did what he needed to do for the Devils.
I want to also mention that during the 2010-2011 Guinness World Record year, that is obviously in our criteria, Joe Myers played 9 games. Now, that's a lot of games during that iconic season. And his stats from that season were goals against 2.17. Anytime you're near 2 goals a game, that is fantastic. And his save percent was 90.8%. That's a hell of a contribution from Joe Myers. Joe Myers has now earned his spot as our alternative choice to Phil Ozair in our first Elite League era. There we go. Welcome in, Joe Myers.
Welcome in, Joe Myers.
There we are.
I got no problem with that.
Nope.
Okay, in our defense, so we've already had Frank Evans. We've already had Jason Stone. We've already had Mike Ware.
Yes.
So we've talked about him when we've talked about the great British D-men that have been in the club. Still going strong. Mark Richardson, pure class. Every single partner I know, he's only had the 2 in the latter years, but if you talk about Andrew Hotham and Gleeson Fournier, as we will later on, the first thing they mention whenever they get all the accolades is, look at the guy I'm playing with next to me, and it's Mark Richardson. And there's no coincidence that whoever plays with Mark Richardson is the standout D-man in the league, and that's a massive testament to the skills and the unselfishness and everything that the humbleness of Mark Richardson.
And
Absolutely,
we're going with him in this era. Sorry, but we're going with him in this era rather than the next era, because for me, he's still the young centre coming up through the ranks in this era. I don't picture him as the all-conquering D-man.
I think the problem you get, and we did say the rules at the start, they didn't necessarily have to win their trophies or have their best years in that era. I think I just added on that best years in the era bit, but it was seamless. I think when you get into the next era, and I don't want to sort of prejudge it, but when you've got the likes of Andrew Hotham, Gleeson Fournier, I think it's tough.
Yeah.
I think it's a great point, guys. I was going to say, just to mirror the Jason Stone story, you got Mark Richardson as the centre. I put him in the next era because he actually gets my vote in the next era, and I love the fact that for me, a British player got my vote. That the guy I'm going to throw into this era, because I would like him in this team, but he wouldn't get into the next era necessarily, is Tyson Marsh.
Interesting, yeah. So Marshy's another one I got down here. Again, like superb guy, superb teammate, did everything well. Turned into a great leader. I mean, Faulkner, who's a great leader himself, said the best captain I've ever had is Tyson Marsh. So and of course, Marshy lifts the first trophy of the new era. which we go on to. Okay, so let's. I think.
Sorry, that wasn't meant to end the Richardson debate.
No.
Because I love the fact, for me, that a British guy would get my vote in the new era. I put Richardson in the other era.
Yeah.
But this is the danger, is Fran. He says there's so many great players in the next era, and Mark Richardson should not be missing out. If anything, you could say he should have 2 jerseys from the 2 eras.
He's Steve Morris. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we might have to get tactical on this one.
Okay. Well, let's see what else we've got for this.
Yeah.
Or we're planting the seeds for the people doing the voting to be tactical.
Yes. Okay, so another name in this era who, again, is as a player, was an unbelievable teammate, a guy that you wanted on your team every night, that led the charge, that did all the gritty, dirty stuff without looking for any personal glory, who then went on to be an absolutely fantastic coach and held the club together through some sticky times, Gerard Adams.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. I always just want to say, because people will criticize me for being a hypocrite, because there's certain people that horrible season we never talk about. I think the fact that G was given that year, you and Franny, or Franny, you and G should have been allowed to finish that year. I wondered whether G had reached the end of his. So I don't want to be a hypocrite. I wondered whether G had reached the end of his tenure in Cardiff. But I think G, as the player, was my favourite player in Cardiff for the years he played here. I thought he was absolutely superb. He never lost a corner battle. He, for a guy who, again, was stocky and maybe didn't look the most natural athlete, he could jump into the play, he could score goals. Let's not forget that role he played in the Challenge Cup final when we came back against Coventry, and that tipping goal we scored. So I don't want to be that hypocrite guy who says that maybe I didn't think that G's tenure had come to an end. But I think Gerard Adams should be lauded as a hero for Cardiff Devils.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you look at this era, what he did as a player, what he did as a coach, and when we're talking about an all-time team, I think Gerard Adams is a walk-in for me. But that's for the fans to vote on.
And especially when, if it gets announced, we get to play the G song.
Yeah,
when the best bits of music
Saskatchewan Pirates.
Absolutely.
Last Saskatchewan Pirate that myself and Paul Sample came back from the Calgary Stampede and decided that was going to be G's song. There we go. Bit of history behind that.
Because I guess when he first started, sorry, Fred, just to give him a bit more of a pump his tires a bit more. That first season in Cardiff, he was a forward.
Yeah.
And he was brilliant at that. And it wasn't until he put himself on D, I think, was when he became coach, and that's when he kind of went up another couple of notches for me, because I think the way he influenced the game from there and policed the game was phenomenal.
Yes.
His natural position was D. So he's, he played for the Regina Pats, great organisation in Canadian junior hockey, and he was a D man, and I think he maybe still holds the penalty record for them. I don't know if you ever catch the tweets when you see legitimate heavyweight fighters. What's his name? Somebody Parker, Derek Parker, Scott Parker, one of the Parkers.
Scott Parker.
Yeah, talking about how they loved watching G play and looked up to him because of how tough he played and blah blah blah. Always took on guys much bigger than himself. So he was a D, but he had that versatility. He could go up as a forward. Again, he would put himself in that position if the team needed it. I remember one year, I don't know if JD, you'll remember it, we were so struggling with injuries.
Yeah.
In the playoff semi-final, the quarterfinals, our third line was G as centre.
Yeah.
Or maybe he wasn't centre. Phil Hill might be
There was
centre.
Davis Pickett and G, I remember.
No. So the year that I played, there was me, Phil Hill, and G was our line, and we got 2 goals in that quarter final, and it was like, it was such a thrown together line, and but he just Phil Hill's obviously a talented player in his own right, but he had to do a role for his team on that night and put himself up there on that forward line to give us some depth.
The story I love, and I don't think I imagined this, so you can tell me. This was before I knew you properly. I remember the season launch for that world record year, and you were kind of talking about why you'd signed certain players, and you were talking about the fifth defenseman, and you said, yeah, I kind of went to Jared and said, I found this player, and he's played, X number of games. He scores, 25, 30 points a season. He has 10 fights a year. He puts up 100, and he can play this many minutes. And apparently G went, well, who's this guy? And you went, well, it's Jared Adams.
It's a true story. So one thing that always bugged me about G is that he was too humble, and he didn't probably play himself enough for how good he was, especially when the game was getting tight. He wanted to give others the opportunity. And the end of that season, before I had that conversation in the summer, he was like, I'm in an hour about should he play, and dropping down the line. And he was always sitting himself out in the last 10 minutes of games when we needed him. If ever you needed Jared Adams, it's the last 10 minutes of the game, because he is going to shut that game down.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make the point in the summer about how good and how valuable he was as a player. And I did. I listed this guy's points. I listed the penalties and the fights and the guys that he'd fought, all these massive heavyweights. And he's fought this guy. And he's like, let's sign him. Do it. Sign him. Who is it? And I was like, yeah, I think you know him. It's Jared Adams. And I think he might have hung up on me when I said that. He didn't kind of see the funny side of it.
I think that's a great story.
But it was to make the point about just how valuable he was to the team, and how if he was signing Jared Adams, the player, he'd be playing him a lot more. So yeah, it is a true story. Okay. So
I know we went on about G there, but I think we haven't talked about him a lot on the podcast. So I think probably that G deserved a longer, section.
Yeah, and someone else that we must get on to talk about everything that he's doing now, as well as his career. Okay. So G, we got a question mark over Richie because of the era. Tyson Teplitsky, one of my favorite ever teammates. Did he win a trophy?
Yeah, he would have won the knockout cup.
Confirmed.
2007. Comrack and Mark Smith and what have you. So that was Cup.
Yes. Okay, he did. Fantastic. Tyson Teplitsky.
Yeah.
I'd have him on our team today. He would be a phenom. On this team. I mean, we used to ride him so hard in terms of ice time. I remember there's one particular game stands out. I think it was up in Hull. He must have played 52 minutes that night or something ridiculous, because we were down so many players. And then we ended up making him take a load of penalty shots as well, I think. And just an unbelievable athlete, an unbelievable player, smart, brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the best part of that.
I think he would have been talked about in the same breath as Hotham and Fournier if he played in similar times. I think he would have contributed a similar amount of points.
Agree with that.
And again, Patterson made him an A. He was coming out of college and was wearing a face cage the year before he started playing for the Devils, and then Patterson made him an A. So he was obviously a guy that the players liked.
I think again, in terms of big games, where this stands out to me, that first away game we played in Basingstoke when the rink wasn't ready, and we had this totally new look team, and I think Teplitsky got himself a couple of goals in that game, and I remember leaving Basingstoke's rink that night thinking that's the guy. I always managed to find him in all of this mess that we've gone through. That is a steal.
Because you'd be leading the charge, looking to try and get us in the game, and then inevitably when you're chasing the game, you give up a kind of odd man rush, and you can see the goal, and somehow he'd come out of nowhere and get back there and win the puck back. It was just unbelievable. Yeah, fantastic player. Okay, so Adams, Teplitsky, and maybe on Richardson, and we'll have a look at the tactics around that now. So then the other guys I've got down. We mentioned Tyson Marsh, didn't we?
Yeah. So Freddie, I've got Burgoyne, I've got Stone.
Is there a trophy for Burgoyne?
Yeah, Challenge Cup 2006.
Challenge Cup.
Did he drop it?
Yeah, of course.
So I've got Burgoyne, I've got Stone, and we've got to get Stoney in somewhere. I've got Adams, I've got Teplitsky, I've got Richardson, I've got Marsh, and then I've got the Smith brothers.
Yeah. I've got both the Smith brothers down. You can also talk about Josh Batch in this era.
You can talk about Josh Batch in this era.
Yep. I've got the Smith brothers, Tyson Marsh, Batchy, Toplitsky. Yeah. So Jeff Burgoyne. Yeah. I don't know why I'm losing which guys have won trophies or not, especially I was teammates with them at the time. Sorry, guys. But yeah, Jeff Burgoyne, 100%. Fantastic player, fantastic guy. Again, somebody that gave his, like, the character. I mean, we used to call him, like, not the mayor, but, you know, he was always kissing babies. You know, he was that kind of celebrity. Yeah. People would just, like, hand him a child and have a photo, and, you know, he was just so popular, wasn't he? And, you know, embraced it all, and was a great servant to the club. So yeah, that makes it tough now.
I'm going to say something controversial about going down in terms of this list. I think he gets very close based on his relationship with the fans. But that final year, towards the end, he was made into an auxiliary forward, and I kind of feel as the Elite League was kind of going up, Bergie was maybe coming the other way. So I think in terms of weighing everything up in terms of talent and things, he wouldn't quite make my list. But I definitely think that there's going to be a sizable amount of the fan base that will want him mentioned, because he's someone who any new fan that was going into a game, they would probably notice him for his skating style. He always used to skate with his tongue out, chasing after the puck like an angry dog. Like, he always looked like he really played for the shirt. But I do think weighing everything up would make my list.
In his first 3 out of his 4 years with us, he's our top scoring D-man. And then, like you say, in that fourth year, he played as a forward. He'd never played as a forward. Whenever I see Bergie, and he came over to visit, I say not long ago now, it was probably ages ago, but and we were talking about the time when he was that auxiliary forward. He played centre between me and Hilly, and we had so much fun because we could just play like maniacs, and he just loved it because we were just like, he was so full of energy, and, you know, me and Hilly had energy too, so we were just chipping it in and seeing how many people we could run, and it was so much fun to play. But, you know, he had 9 goals that year by playing as a forward, and he's never played as a forward. Playing as, not even just chucking him up on the wing, chucking him as a centre, because he was trusted to do a reliable job in there. So, I think there's a strong case.
I actually second Gaz's point there. I love Jeff Burgoyne. I think we're going to go and talk about someone who was box office and probably kept the Devils going when we talk about forwards, and that's Brad Voth. I think when the Devils, you know, had that year, the lockout year, the first lockout year, where they needed to get fans back following that, I think Jeff Burgoyne was somebody you could sell the club around. I'm with Gaz in that he didn't make my final 4, but I think he deserves a mention.
Okay, so we've got, I think Burgoyne over Kenton and Mark Smith. As much as I love them and value what they did, but does he make...
We haven't spoken about him. Are we saying Stoney's a lock-in for this era?
No, we've already selected him for the last era.
Did we? I think we had Ruggles, Lawless, and Chin as our 3.
He's the Superleague era.
Was he Superleague?
Yeah. Superleague D-man. Noble, Ware, Evans, and Stone.
Okay, so being tactical, is he going to be voted into that Superleague team?
I would vote him in. It's not for us to decide, but I would personally vote him in that.
I would. I just wonder whether he will be, and I think Jason Stone should be in this team. That's all I'm saying.
But we can say that about a lot of the players in the thing, and there's going to be a huge amount of players who would miss out, who would make individuals teams. And this is where Hall of Fame comes into it eventually. Hopefully, one day.
Perhaps I agree, but the record appearance holder.
Yeah, and that's why, to me, he gets in the Super League. Yeah,
I'd vote him in.
I'd vote him in. I would.
And hopefully people
me in
will
the
be.
arsehole. I'm not sure he's going to get voted in that Super League team.
But
I think you make the same argument for Richardson in the present era team.
Agreed.
I don't think he gets in ahead of Hotham or Fournier, even if he should.
Agreed. No, fair
Yeah.
point. Fair point.
Keep in mind, guys, if you want to campaign hard for people once the voting starts, that's on you. That's where the,
No,
I think
that's
where it
a fair
starts.
if
point.
people are listening, people will listen to this, and the view here from my three esteemed colleagues is that Jason Stone would be a lock-in deservedly in the Super League, and you just hope that would be enough to influence.
Yeah.
But it's people's opinions at the end of the day, and this is where these things are absolutely great. And what the club are doing with the Jews is awesome. But yeah, it's going to cause some great debates and great chat, which is all good.
Okay, I'm just going to outright campaign for Jason Stone.
I'm going to get the placards out.
Guys, if you're watching this, please put Jason Stone in this team.
Okay, so we are going D-men. Jared Adams, Tyson Teplitsky, Tyson Marsh, and then we've got one of Jeff Burgoyne or Mark Richardson. Well, yeah,
I think Richardson should be in, so it's your guys' call whether you think it's better for him to get in this era.
I tactically believe he should be in this era. Or era, as we say over here, because I think it's going to be tough for the vote to see through Hotham and Fournier in the next round.
Okay. I'm going to be honest, I love Gleason Fournier. I have him ahead of Fournier, but I understand your point, so why don't we put him in?
Okay, there we go.
So that's Bergie out. Richie.
Honourable mention to Jeff Burgoyne.
Yeah.
Tainted by him doing a job for the team as a forward. Doesn't seem to have gone down well.
That's on you, Gaz. That's on you.
Yeah.
I said it was controversial when I said it, but look.
Hey, you backed him up, JD.
Yeah.
It's commentators packed there, Franny.
Yeah.
Look,
so
you've got to have Soga villain in every little part.
For the record, his teammates really appreciated him stepping out of his comfort zone into a role that he hasn't done before for the benefit of the team and not looking for personal accolades. just to get that out. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so that moves us on to the forwards. Again, there's some really strong contenders in here, and then some other ones that might be a bit more left field, but I think there's only one place I can start when we talk about the forwards during this era, and that's the mayor, Brad Voth. Iconic figure for Cardiff, the face of the Devils. I really feel he did more than anybody during this time to carry us through what was quite a barren time, but obviously he was on those 2 trophy-winning teams in this era. And as tough as he was underrated as a player. Always had 20 plus goals. And yeah, he was feared throughout the league. People tried to replicate him, couldn't do it. Very, very unique. So Brad Voth would be my first suggestion.
And this is an era where, there are guys who come to Cardiff and have genuinely loved this day, but they have gone elsewhere. And as if they're right, that's not a criticism. To maybe get a bigger payday or something that they could at the time. I'm sure Voth could have written his own check with 3 other elite league teams anytime he wanted. But his loyalty on top of the way he played as well really puts him up the list for me.
Yeah,
I agree for the sake of being controversial and as Gaz.
I think it's for the sake of being a knob then.
Well, that too, Franny. But I know I'm already that. So the difference with me, I know I'm a knob. I choose to remember Brad Voth from kind of that first season to maybe the end of the Jeff Pierce season. So the year after, where I think he was unplayable. I think in his last couple of years, maybe he became a bit of a pantomime villain, and almost. But I think Brad Voth should get credit for when the Devils had nothing to sell. There was no USP about the Devils whatsoever. Brad Voth was the USP. I think he was a great player for the Devils between the first season he signed and the year we lost the third playoff final to Nottingham. I think, unfortunately for me, his last couple of years, because I think referees targeted him and different things, he became a bit of a pantomime villain. And I felt for Brad Voth a little bit in that sense. So I kind of choose to remember him from that first year to the Jeff Pierce year. And I think what happened after that, it all got a bit messy.
Yeah, there was no doubt whatsoever that teams couldn't sign him because he kept turning them down, and the only way that they could stop him was to get him suspended. So there was reviews. I think some of the decisions are absolutely shameful that were made on him. I look back at that Rod Sarich incident where he got the slash in, where he literally gave him a tap on the back of the calf. He had 6 games for that, and then 6 games for a sucker punch when it wasn't. He was tapping him to say, hey, you better be ready. So he's given him the warning. Then he's dropped the gloves, and he's ended up with a 12-game suspension for that. It was hideous. He was targeted. Interestingly, in that year where there was that difficult decision, like the most difficult decision ever, to take the C off his jersey, because I'm not going to say he was removed as captain, because he was always our captain, but on the ice, he couldn't stand near an official without getting a 10-minute misconduct. So we tried to take that off, that pressure away from him, to try and let him play a bit more. And Mark Richardson, a young Mark Richardson, stepped in, and took the C, which was a tough thing to do. It's amazing. During that year, he actually had 22 regular season goals and 3 playoff goals, even during that horrendous year. And he could have moaned and bitched about that decision, and he could have shut up shop, when the C was taken off his jersey, because I know it hurt him massively. It was being cruel to be kind, because we knew that he just wouldn't be able to play any shifts if he was a captain. But he didn't. He just dealt with it like a man, and got on with it and put up a stack of goals, like his second best goal return for us.
Franny, Gaz, you told me this in episode 4. I always forget the guy's name. Who was the poor guy for Hull when we played the first game when Richardson was the captain and Voth took out his frustration on him?
Michael Knight?
No. Adam Knight was
the guy.
Adam Knight was the guy that he fought behind the bench.
That's right.
So that's not the incident that you're on about.
It's not.
I mean, it was a guy playing for Hull, and I remember
Matt Miller was lining up next to him.
Yeah. And Voth went and stood there, and the guy could have moved easily, I think, into the centre spot, but he didn't, and he took his beating like a man. And who was that?
He used to have a long-term run-in with Derek Campbell. But it wouldn't have been him. But
I just felt sorry for that guy that night, because that was a lot of frustration coming out.
It was. Yeah. We'll find who that is.
I will find him. As soon as I see the name, it'll all come flooding back.
Yeah. So the next pick that I've got down from this era, we've had him on the pod. So always nice to have a nominee that we've had on the podcast. So we've had Vez in the first one. But again, a guy that made everyone else around him better, and who really bought into Cardiff and is now his home, or Penarth is anyway. Max Beerbauer. I think huge player during this era, very, very talented. And I think, he's got to be a shoe-in for this list anyway.
Well, Franny, you know far more about hockey than Gaz and myself. Hubs, I defer to you as an official, but we put him on our Devils line of the decade. So
we did.
I think Beerbray's got to get in. And all I would say about Max is, at a time when we were an under-budget team and maybe couldn't compete with the 4 arena teams, when Max was on the ice, you felt that there was a chance something might happen. You felt that there was a player on the ice who was either an equal or better than the players on the ice for Sheffield, Nottingham, Belfast, etc. And I think that's a huge tribute to Max Beerbauer.
He could make something happen, couldn't it? Whether it was he was such a smooth skater and puck handler, but also the massive hits. Max Boom Boom Beerbauer, the name says it all, as coined by Matt Toe. He'll remind me that he did pick that name for him and told Sully to announce it, unbeknown to Max, and then it stuck. So yeah, Max Beerbauer for definite. Another guy that was probably the slowest starter for somebody that's so revered by the Devils fans. And again, like a McIntyre, there was people calling for his head. One of which
I'll just tick off my first 3 names here, Franny, by the way.
Yeah. One of which was his own teammate, Ryan Finity,
Really?
who's now a coach in his own right, came to me and said, Franny, I think we can do a lot better than Stu McRae. And I was like, no, this guy's good. It's going to be good. He says, it's 20 games. He hasn't scored a goal yet. And he hadn't scored in 20 games. And then the touch paper got lit and he was phenomenal. Yeah. And in that world record year, when we've got him, Tyler Michelle, who obviously misses out on this under the 3-season rule, and Sam Smith having a career year, Stu McRae, who had a hell of a junior career and is still talked highly about in that part of the world for his junior career. But he really came into his own then, didn't he? And then he went on to captain the Devils and moved from the 3rd line straight up to the 1st line.
Probably, along with Doug McEwen, the best backhand shooter I've seen play for the Devils. But Stuart McRae on his backhand side could finish as well as a forehand side. I remember a goal against Coventry in the playoff quarterfinals at the Big Blue Tent where he went top shelf. I forget who the netminder was, whether it was... I'm trying to think who Coventry would have had, but Stuart McRae was fantastic. He saw the ice. He was a big, rangy guy, but I always remember him being as fantastic on his backhand side as he was on his forehand side.
Peter Hirsch, you were thinking of in Coventry.
Peter Hirsch, thank you.
And Stephen Burns, you were thinking of in Hull.
Stephen Burns, yeah, he's the guy that took, yeah. Oh, bless him.
Guys, I asked you this off camera. He doesn't qualify, but are we going to take 30 seconds to talk about Scott Matska?
Yeah, I mean, he if it was 2 seasons, then he would be a very strong contender, as would Mac Faulkner. I think it's only right to mention him. But Scott Matska, we mentioned before about just the compete level on the guy was just insane. The best 2-way centre, arguably, that we've had, because he was as happy doing the defensive work. He was that competitive. He didn't want any pucks in our net as much as he wanted to go down the other end and either lay on a backdoor chance for John Pell to tap in, or Max Beerbauer. And again, when we talk about balanced lines, we talked about Ian Cooper, Moria, and McEwen. That Beerbauer, Matska, Pele line was just had it all, didn't it? I was
going to ask you, Franny, in terms of 35 years of Cardiff Devils hockey, if you were to name 3 lines, and that's a different podcast, would it be Moria, McEwen, Cooper, Martin, Morissette, Lord, Matska, Pele, Beerbauer? Would they be the 3 iconic lines of the Cardiff Devils?
And then you're missing out the black line of Hodge, Matulak, and Thornton.
And Adam Hill and Francis.
Adam Hill.
Yeah. He should have gone with that line in the playoff final, honestly. It still bugs me to this day. We owned the semi-final, 2 goals we had, and then players came back from injury and they came back. But anyway, back to subject. It's worth remembering the contribution that Matska gave to us on the ice, and obviously we always remember the fight that he had off the ice to this day.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we've got Voth, Beerbauer, McRae.
Yeah. I'm going to throw, may I throw, because I think he should be on this team, and it's a similar Mark Richardson point, and I'm being a bit tactical here. May I throw in Mr. Matthew Myers?
Yes, he's on my list, definitely. Mm-hmm. So you got Matthew Myers in this era. Again, he's in for some tough competition in the present era. But, you look at Myers' trophy winning record, and that's just not a coincidence because he's done it on 2 different teams. A face-off specialist, the next best thing to Ian Cooper in front of the net in terms of taking that dirty punishment to give space to his teammates.
What a powerful guy to stand in front of that net.
Yeah. And then adapted his game in his later years to play that fourth line role, and there's probably no one else that you'd want in that fourth line role in terms of, and I also think of over the last year or two, those penalty killing shifts where it's just been insane with, and you can see him come off the ice. He's literally emptied the tanks and he can barely make it to the bench because he's given you so much in that sort of 45 seconds. But definitely happy to have him in there. And I'm going to follow that up with another Welshman, Phil Hill.
Yeah.
Who,
Phil Hill,
I mean, again, so underrated by the fans. I think because he is 6'3" and he didn't drop the gloves every week. He did a fair amount of hitting, probably an underestimated amount of hitting, but he did throw loads of hits, and it's something I think he did really well. But what impresses me about Phil Hill is that he played on that second line for so long.
Yeah.
And whether it was with Finner and Voth or McRae and Voth, playing the second line as a British guy it was quite rare, isn't it? I mean, it's normally like a third line role, but you put him out there and it just gives you so much more depth.
So Franny, I completely agree, and Hubs, Gaz, I'm going to bring you in on this. I think it's a Welshman shootout because I tell you why. I would like this guy in the team. Again, I'm not sure if he's getting in the new era team. I'm going to nominate Jake Morissette. So therefore, for me, it's a straight shootout between Phil Hill and Jonathan Phillips.
Hilly would get my vote because I think he has a best story in terms of he was probably viewed as the lowest prospect of Myers, Phillips and Hill as they were coming up. I think if you were going to poll people as to who was going to make it, he was probably the one that would come in last. But through sheer sort of determination and perseverance, he probably for a time was surpassing Myers, I think, for a 2-3 year spell. So I think that is a story, and the fact that he scored some big goals.
Yeah.
Really big goals.
He did love a big goal too, and the iconic celebration. He'd go in and he'd check the glass. He'd do the Ayatollah.
Yeah,
so that's going to get your vote, John, hasn't it? Just doing the Ayatollah.
Hey, he gets my vote, but I think Jonathan Phillips gets a bad rap because he's known as this iconic captain of the Sheffield Steelers. Franny, I'm not sure whether you mentioned it on camera or off camera. Jonathan Phillips gave a lot of years to the Cardiff Devils. And
he did.
Yeah. 6 years.
And I think if you say it's the shootout and it's mixing all those eras, I think the point is that I think Jonathan Phillips has had a great ice hockey career, captain of GB and so forth and so on. But the majority of that success has come up in Sheffield.
Agreed.
It's been nurtured and born in Cardiff, but we're talking a shootout between two Welsh players to get on the Devils all-time team. It's Phil Hill for me. All the way, but you can't. The career Jonathan Phillips has had is 110% deserved, and the effort he's put in is phenomenal for a British player.
Agreed.
But I think Sheffield have seen the best of that.
The only other guy you've probably got a longer list than me, Franny, and you have as well, guys. The only other guy I'm going to throw in and for me he'd be an honourable mention, but maybe you guys would think differently. Is Ed Patterson.
I've got him on my list too. I got two guys that fit into that category, really. Ed Patterson and Nathan Rempel.
Gaz, do you want to come in on Nathan Rempel?
I think Rems didn't make my list, bless him.
Did he win anything, Cardiff?
Yeah, he very much did.
I'm joking, of course. He got a trick. Yeah. It was sarcastic.
But I mean, I think if I'm going to take into account all of the games I saw Rempel play in influence, I don't know if one or two games overtake.
Sorry, Hubs and Franny, I'm laughing because I'm aware of the conversation Gaz has had with me prior to bringing up on the
But to be fair, I think it was. I think it came up in the Vez podcast. Neil made the point about Ramps and his. I think leading up to the Challenge Cup, then he used to go on streaks. I think it was, wasn't it? And then he was fighting. Then he got that one in, and that in that one, so Rempel wouldn't be in this list for me.
If it was
iconic moments.
Yeah, yeah. That's
iconic
different.
Moments. If you talk about Smith's penalty shot save and I know.
But then we'd have to put in
Superleague and what have you. I think
Millett.
Rempel's Challenge Cup final would get in my top 5 Devils iconic moments.
Yeah. So as Robert Millett's Russian corner curl in the warm up in one game. But yeah, no, absolutely, that is an iconic moment for sure.
Okay, so just getting back on track here. Stu McRae, Max Beerbrier, Brad Voth.
Yes.
They're shoe-ins for me. Matthew Myers, Phil Hill.
Yeah.
Makes us 5.
I second all those. And
then we've got one of Ed Patterson. Mm-hmm. We're discounting Nathan Rempel on the basis of Gaz, and Gaz pays the bills on the podcast. So
if Jeff McGuire of Nathan Rempel listening, this isn't like a personal vendetta.
Can we get Bergie in because that 1 year is a forward?
Yeah. I know, because apparently he didn't do a good enough job. So then you could bring into this era Jake Morissette or Andrew Lord,
like Morissette in there.
Or Andrew Lord.
I've actually got Lord in my new era team.
Okay,
whether he get voted in, I think Morissette as the first captain to lift the league trophy in 20 years. I would like him in there, and I think tactically for me, he gets in better here. But
do you think tactically he gets ahead of McRae, Beerbrier, and Voth?
No, I don't think he gets ahead of.
It's not a very good tactic, then, John.
No, but I don't think he gets ahead of. And I know I'm spoiling it, but I don't think he gets ahead of Haddad, Betavolio, or Ulmer.
Ooh.
You
haven't even mentioned Joey Martin.
I've got to say Joey Martin's a lock-in. I've got to say I'm a huge Lane Ulmer fan, and I'm campaigning for Lane Ulmer.
Yeah. Okay. Right. What I propose we do is we lock in those 5 guys.
Yeah.
We're going to leave one spot open in our third era, and let's move on to 2014-15 to the present. So Devils new era, new ownership, good times are back. Mm-hmm. Goalies. There's 2 goalies that qualify. Ben Bounds, Thomas Murdy.
Lock them in.
Yeah, lock them in. I mean, yeah. They're in. In the defense, we've talked about these 2 guys already. Gave it a little bit of the game away when we talked about Ritchie, Andrew Hotham, Gleason Fournier. 2 of the premier offensive talents in the entire league of this era.
Yeah.
And
Gleason underrated in the years when Hotham was here, despite almost having those. And then
he took a backseat to Hoth because that's what the team needed him to do. Yeah. And then when Andrew Hotham went, it was the king is dead, long live the king, wasn't it? Up he stepped. Yeah. He goes next to Mark Richardson, which is an influencing factor, and he absolutely tears apart the league, not just for the point scoring, because he was in the running right up until the end for the top scorer in the league, which I think Marty might have won that year. But he was in that. But his plus minus one year was something like 52.
Yeah,
and he led the league by a zillion.
With less time on ice than Hoth.
I don't know those stats. How did you know those? Yeah. So those 2 have got to be lock-ins.
Yeah.
Can't say enough about those 2. Then.
Can I just take this opportunity to say as much as I can about Andrew Hotham? We're friends now, by the way. His beautiful wife.
And his dad?
No, his dad hates me. and rightly so. But his beautiful wife brokered a lovely peace arrangement between myself and Andrew Hotham, and we speak now. We're good. We're good.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Okay, so if we have selected Tyson Marsh in the previous era, and we've selected Mark Richardson in the previous era, we are left with Josh Batch.
Yeah.
Mark Lewis.
Yes.
Bryce Reddick.
Those are the three I had.
Where do you want?
So again, I'm just speaking personally. I think, and I have a little bit of fun about the fact that Andrew Hotham rightly didn't like me. Andrew Hotham for me is the best defenseman to play for the Cardiff Devils in that he was a game changer. Not the best athlete. Gleason Fournier is a better skater and what have you. For a guy who could make things happen for the Cardiff Devils, for the guy who played minutes, for a guy who was a game breaker, for a guy who could fight.
Yeah.
Andrew Hotham.
And tell me this, JD. Has any player that you can remember, and you can remember a lot, gone out on such a high that Andrew Hotham did with that game-winning goal in Belfast, where, like you said, skating wasn't his strongest point of his game, but he cut through that team and buried a huge, huge goal to bring that title, and then
Franny game-winning goal in the playoff final as well.
Game-winning goal in the playoff final and in the league. Has any player in history gone out on a bigger high than Andrew Hotham?
No, for me, the best defenseman to ever play for the Cardiff Devils. So I think Andrew Hotham, not a natural athlete, and I know that frustrated Andrew Lord sometimes, but in terms of a game breaker,
competitive,
just a guy you wanted on the ice in those crucial moments. I don't think there's a more clutch player on defense than Andrew Hotham. But I respect him so much because his dislike for me was so intense that even in Mark Richardson's testimonial game, when I was on the ice interviewing players, he was firing pucks at me. Which I don't like.
And that's why he gets my vote.
I respect the level of hate he had for me.
That's why he gets my vote.
He gets my vote for that.
Okay, so we got Andrew Hotham, Gleason Fournier.
Yes.
Is there any other runners and riders for the remaining two, given that Marshy and Richie are already selected, so therefore ineligible for this era?
I got to give my props to Gareth Hewish, who 3 minutes into Mark Lewis's first game for the Cardiff Devils said this guy's going to be a hero for the Cardiff Devils. Gareth Hewish identified that in commentary in the first game that Mark Lewis ever played, and I think Mark Lewis, again, perhaps not the greatest. He hasn't got terrible foot speed, but in terms of what
I think his foot speed's good for his size and
I don't think his foot
else
speed's
he does.
bad. I think what he wants, I think his intensity. I think he's got an underrated offensive side, and of course we all know about his physical side. And is there a guy in the new era who enjoyed playing for the Cardiff Devils as much or wanted to be here as much as Mark Lewis?
I remember that game in Belfast. It was in the cup. Was it in the quarterfinals or something? Where he got 2 goals.
Yeah.
It's wraparound.
Yeah. And I also thought, I think, and it happens a lot. You come across from North America where you're fighting for your job, so literally fighting for your job if you're that size. And I think you come over to a different country and you're like, right, I want to play a bit now. And I think he did get into that kind of situation where he didn't really want to fight. And then all of a sudden, somebody poked the bear and he just got the eye of the tiger back, didn't he? And now you look at him and, you're calling out a guy like Gagnon or Springer in Manchester, tough guys, Fitzgerald, who was the lead bully, if you like. Palic. And he's instigating those fights. He's saying in the handshake, hey, you got to fight me next game.
Yeah.
And he's doing all those things. And you just see that switch. He got that switch back, didn't he? That as soon as that fight is going on, helmet comes off, he's fixed on there, he squares off, and he mastered that kind of sneaky first punch, didn't he? And then away you go. Loved it. Let's put him in.
And I got to say, sorry, Gaz, you go on.
There's two things Mark Lewis really stick out, and number one is I will never forgive myself for not realising he had scored the equaliser in the Challenge Cup final. I thought it was
against Sheffield. Yeah, where he floated it in from the blue line, didn't he? Yeah.
I'll never forgive myself for not calling that correctly.
I didn't like to mention it, but
the second moment for me is John. I don't know if you remember this, but we were down with the benches in Nottingham. Before the semi-final against Dundee.
Yeah.
And Lou was there with his headphones in. He had his stick over his shoulders. He was doing all sorts of limbering up. And we were just leaving after having a chat with Jamie Elson. And I just looked at Lou. I went, Lou, are you ready? I don't know if anyone who's listening has ever spoken to Mark Lewis, but he is a laid-back, cool cat. And he just looked at me. He just went, born ready.
Born ready.
He just walked into the locker room. That's all he said. He was just proper in the zone. I thought, yeah, he's got to be.
I was going to say, Gaz, you and I have had along with Alid, have had the privilege of speaking to or interviewing a lot of these Devils players. And Mark Lewis is a man who doesn't say a lot, but he's a really nice guy. I love Mark Lewis. I think he's such a genuine guy. And if you get Mark Lewis to say something, it's always something that has meaning behind it. He doesn't say anything for the sake of saying it.
It's a man of few words, but the words he says, mean an absolute lot. And I think this era we're blessed with a lot of guys who've had 2 years. Trevor, Carl, and stuff. But Mark Lewis loves the Devils, and people love him. He's very underrated in a lot of stuff he does. And for me, it's definitely in.
Okay, so that's 3. So then we got 1 out of Josh Batch and Bryce Reddick.
Oh.
And they're both both D2 springs, both been used as forwards, both been used as D. For me, I would put the edge to Josh.
I'd agree with that.
And his work, an outstanding contribution he's made to the club, and he's worked hard on his game, continues to work hard, and does a great job. Again, underrated.
I agree. I love Josh Batch. The reason I'm going to go Reddick is because I think we could have this conversation in 10 years' time, and Josh will do another 10 years with us and could get in. I'm going to give it to Reddick for 2 reasons. A, that Andrew Lord once gave him Coach's Player of the Year, and you know I'm a big Andrew Lord convert. And secondly, just that Gaz, that celebration you always reference in the playoff semi-final against Nottingham, and you know a guy who's 5 foot nothing but would fight anybody, similar to Mark Lewis. Bryce Reddick is one of those guys who genuinely enjoyed being a Cardiff Devils, and I'm a Cardiff Devil. I'm not saying that's not Josh Batch, but I think when we do the 45th all-time Devils team, I think Josh Batch is still young enough that he comes into that conversation. So I give my vote to Bryce Reddick.
My one story on Bryce Reddick, which sums up Bryce a little bit for me, is Nottingham playoffs when we won. The whole team in the corner with the fans behind the plexiglass celebrating, the champagne going off absolutely everywhere. I think it was the year Bryce might have had a couple of issues on social media, but turned around, looked down the far end of the ice, and Bryce was just sat there on the boards by himself in the corner. And went down and said, "Oh, hey," and he said, "I'm just enjoying, soaking up, watching everyone enjoying this and celebrating what the was before then going back in to join the celebration." But just taking that time, he just took that time out to go back, watch everyone, and that he was that sort of person. It was for everyone else and didn't look for his own personal accolades first and foremost. He was a team guy.
And the other thing, Babs, I think that's a great story. The other reason I slightly give my vote to Bryce Reddick, and we've mentioned it about Ian McIntyre, Franny, you mentioned it about Stuart McRae. Bryce Reddick falls into the category of he had to work very hard to win the fans over. There was a lot of people who perhaps wanted to cut Bryce Reddick, and now I think if you ask people about Bryce Reddick, they say he was a guy who was very, very popular in Cardiff. So to go from for want of a better phrase, to go from zero to hero, that's why I would slightly give my vote to Bryce Reddick.
Making this one.
You make a good point, because there's some players that are unfairly remembered for their maybe last bit in Cardiff, and everything good that they've done is forgotten, like Jeff Burgoyne that we've discovered, like Brad Voth, how you talk about his last 2 seasons, yet he put up 25 goals, but those kind of things. But Reds is the other way around. Like say, early on, there was people calling for his head, and it was horrific what he had to go through, and that kind of stuff has just got to stop. It doesn't do anything any good, and we're seeing it more and more now. But that's a whole another topic. But now, if you mention to Devils fans, now that Bryce isn't with us anymore on the team, they would probably say Heart of a Lion, Nobody enjoyed scoring or celebrated harder than Bryce Reddick. Gave everything every time he was on the ice. And those are the things they would say. Nobody would go, I wasn't that fussed with him. People would say those things.
And when you look at the fan bases, when they're obviously we now got the very famous Block 13, they have songs for certain players. Bryce is always one of them. I have an issue with that song where they keep going, walking along, singing a song, walking in a Bryce Wonderland. We skate on the ice. It always should be skating along, but that's a minor point on that song. But my point is that the fans took him to heart. They gave him a song and they recognised, but it took a while. But as Franny says, no one should go through what he and Bouncy Bouncy went through again. But that's a topic for another one. But
Gaz, where are you on this?
I very, very marginally, my vote would go to Josh Batch for longevity.
Yep.
He carries over 2 eras, and I think that's difficult to do.
Yeah.
He's someone who's not let us down through Champions Hockey League. He's grown with the team. Bryce didn't get the opportunity to do that because he's only here for 3 seasons. That's not a slant against him. But I just think to come away from this list and Josh Bams not make it would be a real shame. And I think it just comes down to that seniority and longevity for me.
Gaz, I think you make a good argument there. I mean, if you look at, as much as I, could talk up Reds, if you look at Josh Batch, he came to us as a very young guy, and he has not grown physically because he was always huge anyway, but grown as a player into a GB international, who's a big part of that GB team now, from being that, very young guy coming in. And he's gone through that 9 years with us, 9 seasons, where he's played a big part in every single season, played big minutes for us. And it's guys like that you need to have on your team if you're going to be successful, because you need that depth, whether it's on D, whether it's on forward. I think I think Hubs, you just said about Champions League. Do you remember when him and Richie got paired up against the top pairings of the top teams in the Champions League? Because we always had the group of death, and they didn't look out of place. They shut them down. They did a hell of a job for the team that night, and that just showed how much he's elevated his game as the standards got better. So my gut is telling me to edge with Batchy for 9 years service, from coming from a young lad into the guy he is now. He's moved here. Him and Tash have bought a house. They are devils through and through. And I'm not saying that Bryce wasn't, because you saw the passion and everything that we talked about him. But I'm edging with Batchy. But I mean,
he deserves to be on the. I think as you said before, there's going to be the 2. I think who most people would.
He's not going to win it, is he?
No, but to be on that nominate, he fully deserves to be on that short list.
I agree. The final 2 things I'd say on this, I agree on. I'm happy to go with Josh Batch. I think he's a fantastic player first and foremost. A little bit tongue in cheek. I think similar to myself in terms of marital spouse, he's punching above his weight. So I think that. Tash is beautiful. I love his mum and dad, particularly Kev.
Kev.
Such a super guy. And the other thing I'd say, just in terms of Mark Richardson, why I was going to give him my vote in this era, Gaz, you'll remind me who we played against because you commentated. But Mark Richardson in the Champions League last year possibly gave the best performance I've seen from a Devils player at Cardiff Devils. And that's why I think Mark Richardson is a true Cardiff Devils hero, because any level you've ever asked Mark Richardson to play at for the Cardiff Devils, he has excelled himself at. So, but going back to Josh Batch, if he's getting the vote, I will very much sleep easily, because I think Josh Batch is a great guy.
There we go. Done.
Batch is in. On
to the forwards. The GOAT. You can't be the GOAT and not get nominated in. And here's a question for you. How long has Joey Martin been the GOAT? Do you know what the answer is? Ever since he was a kid. Boom, boom.
That's fantastic.
Did you write that with your picks in? Yeah.
There we go. I'm available on weekends as well.
1 hour and 48 minutes into that podcast. If anybody's listening still, that's fantastic.
Joey Martin. We don't even need to. We need a Joey Martin episode anyway. We'll have Brian Parker on it as the Joey Martin fan club secretary. Joey Martin is in.
Yeah.
Right. Next suggestions. I think, another guy that's bought into Cardiff and, made Cardiff his home, and, the passion and everything that you need to win championships, this guy has done. Joey Haddad.
Yep.
Yeah. Joey Haddad's shoe-in for me.
Yep. You mentioned him, and we've still got this spot open, haven't we, in the previous era? Jake Morissette, most successful Devils captain. I think he comes into this category of when people talk about Jake Morissette, they think about his last season, where his point production dropped off a cliff. The reason why, because Lauder was using him as the troubleshooter for any line that wasn't working. Any line that wasn't working, put Mo on it and it got better. And then another line wasn't working, put Mo on it, it got better.
It was Andrew Lord's go-to in an interview, and Gaz, you and I interviewed Andrew Lord a lot. He would always reference the fact if a line wasn't working, he would put Jake Morissette on it. And I think Jake Morissette, as a team guy for the Cardiff Devils, God, Jesus, that guy did a lot. And then you think of the penalty killing, you think of the block shots.
Penalty shots.
And the big goals, and crystallized by the empty net goal to bring home the playoff final. Jesus, Jake Morissette did a lot for the Cardiff Devils.
So in his 3 seasons in the new era, first 2 seasons, he was second and third in scoring on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Then he had obviously the injury hit season, didn't he? And then he still gets a bucket load of points the year after. I mean, he was probably underrated in terms of his offensive production, but like you said, all these other roles, the penalty killing, the penalty shots, if there was a face-off with a minute to go and you're a goal up, you're not putting him out there to win the face-off because he wasn't that strong. But as the winger, to get out to the point man to stop a shot and to block a shot and to do all that stuff, he's on the ice.
Yeah,
he was a go-to man. I think very much we need to put him in this era, and I think there's a great shout for him getting one of the spots. I really do.
My fear is he doesn't get in, Franny, and I think Jake Morissette should be in this team.
Yeah.
Well,
but he'll be in your team, JD, and that's
get your campaign going.
Yeah.
All right. So let's, if we pencil him in, because we've got the option to bring him back into the other era. Okay. So then we've got Matthew Myers in the previous era, so he's out of contention for this era. 2 guys you mentioned, you often talk about them together. They joined the club at the same time. They joined from the same club in Italy where they'd won countless championships. Sean Bentivoglio, Lane Ulmer. They were, to me, what we were missing and what we needed to get us over the line, because we had that mental block that you see with teams that haven't won a league championship in a long time. You need leaders to come in with that experience to show the other guys exactly what happens in that final 10 games of the season when you're competing for a league championship, what you need to do and how you stay calm and how you don't fall apart, because you see teams fall apart so often when they're in that position. And the bigger the game got, the bigger Benty's game got. And Lane Ulmer, Big Game Lane, not a better nickname in hockey, I don't think. No. Big Game Lane, because he did it in the big games. I mean, when I first saw his first couple of tip-ins, you think, he's got lucky on those. And then when he does it 10, 15 times a season, like the hand-eye on that guy was fantastic. I love the quote from Bentivoglio, because people say, oh, God, I'd love to have seen Ulmer play, 5-6 years ago, because he's not that great a skater now. So when he would have been a better skater, he must have been amazing. And Benty's like, no, he's always been like that. He's never skated.
Was there a better game? And you coached him, Franny. Was there a better guy down the stretch? Because every year we had the debate between September to December.
Yeah.
Oh no, he's a year too old. He's a year too old.
Yeah.
And then from January to April.
That argument went away, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is an argument. Maybe he paced himself, because you can't go at that rate for especially in your later sort of your mid-30s, later 30s. But he knew when he needed to do it, and that was his experience calling on it. So I don't like that kind of approach, because I believe that every time you step on the ice, you should give everything. I think I'm not saying that he didn't give everything, because I just think he was playing probably a smarter game in those early seasons that maybe not everybody appreciates. But you don't see him make any mistakes. You always see him make the smart plays. But then when it came to the stretch, like you say, I don't think there was a more dominant guy. And him and Bentivoglio, I think we should be eternally grateful for taking our team over the line, getting us that championship. Because then it showed the others how it's done, and now they've got that noose to be able to do that.
It's exactly that for me. And again, I tip my hat to Gareth Hewish here, who crystallised it. Lane Ulmer and Sean Bentivoglio showed us how to win. And don't get me wrong, it's a team game, and we had a fantastic team, but we got close but fell at the final hurdle. And then Lane Ulmer and Sean Bentivoglio came in, and we won 2 league championships in a row. And I don't think you can, particularly Lane Ulmer, I think Andrew Lord always talks about the fact that he looked at Ulmer to keep the bench calm. Didn't often say a lot, but if the bench needed to be calm when we were a goal down or something like that, as you can probably tell, I'm a huge Lane Ulmer fan. Gaz, you and I have talked about this a lot, just how big an impact both of them, particularly Lane Ulmer, but both of them had as a Cardiff Devil.
Yeah, and I think we were very fortunate that we get to be at the benches after games. And something that struck me about them very early on was they stayed level all the time. So we may have just been pumped at home by Nottingham 8-0, but they stayed here because they knew, well, we've got tomorrow, we've got next week. Same with getting a big victory. Let's not get carried away because we haven't actually won anything yet. And until we do, we're not going to be satisfied. And you get that feeling that emanates from players when you're lucky enough to be sort of around them during and after games. And I think it was evident really from the first couple of weeks, John, that when these guys came in, they were comfortable, they were there to do a job, they were professionals, and they were going to deliver on exactly what the brief was at the beginning of the year, which is to get the Devils back into contention for a league title.
I think one of my biggest regrets for the way the season ended last year is that Benty did not get the send-off that he deserves. Lane obviously did when he left, but for Sean, I think everyone knew he was planning to retire towards the end of the season. But to him not to have that opportunity for everyone to show the appreciation of what he actually did for the club is I was
completely agree. And he was playing hurt as well. There's
absolutely.
There's a lot of people, and Sean himself would admit that maybe he didn't put up the points in his last season he wanted to. Yeah. But if anyone had the opportunity to talk to him in the bar after the game, God, he was playing hurt.
Yeah, and I think that influences my feelings on that as well. Because you're absolutely right. He'd been playing hurt, and him and Lane brought that winning culture to the club, and he deserved the right send off from the supporters, and I'm sure they would have given it to him. And it's one of the regrets of the way the season ended last year.
Agreed. Okay, so we've got 5, including the penciled in Jake Morissette in this era. So we got one more position. So there's 3 names that I've got down there. I think I know,
Franny, because I've got. Let's say Myers has gone in the last area, so I'll take Myers out.
Yeah.
I'm going to go. My vote goes to Lord because I think he's remembered as a coach, but I think he was a fantastic player. And I would give honourable mentions, and maybe these are some left field shouts, to Chris Culligan.
Yep.
Luke Piggott for everything he's done for the Devils, and for season number 1 and season number 3, Matt Pope. Okay, I've got Culligan, Lord, and Pope down.
Yeah.
good shout on Pigsy for his service, and what a job that he did there. Again, team guy, team first guy, did anything that was needed from him, and he'll be sorely missed. But Andrew Lord, the player, because if you had Andrew Lord, the player, who wasn't the coach, and you had that Andrew Lord that would start the game and get the tempo going, especially when in the big BT, in the big blue tent, BBT, for that initial chip in, make the big hit, get the crowd on their feet. The other team, they just lost the will. And, that won us so many games doing that. The passion that he showed, we always talk about Andrew Lord and passion, that jumping out the penalty box in Coventry on the quarterfinals of the Challenge Cup, and scoring on the buzzer. I think did he take the face off in the Challenge Cup final? Big moments. Andrew Lord, the player, would have been a folk hero anyway if he wasn't
Kevin
coaching.
Noble fight.
Kevin Noble fight, yeah.
Kevin Noble fight.
Yeah, exactly. He had as a player, if he wasn't a coach, his playing career, I think what we're saying is overshadowed by the fact he was such a great coach. So Andrew Lord, the player on that, I totally agree with. Chris Culligan, mightily underrated. And, I think probably some regrets were how many times Chris Culligan got sat out the lineup because he was the easy option to sit out. But every big occasion we sat him out and we lost, it was because we sat Chris Culligan. That was, we literally got rid of the cement. And that's what Cully gave you. I mean, it was in hindsight, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. You got some tough decisions to make. We sat out Chris Culligan in the wrong games. We should have just given him the easy games off and put him in every big game. But very honourable mention to Chris Culligan. Matt Pope was the reason I knew we were going to win the playoffs, because of that tear that he was on, goal a game for like 8 games in a row. I just knew if we had Matt Pope on that weekend, we were going to win the playoffs. Yeah. And sure enough, he got us, some big goals that weekend too.
He also set up 48 for his goal in the playoffs.
He did, yeah. What a play that was. Two
playoffs where he's really influenced. Things.
And he did have that dip in the second season, and I think a lot of people will remember that. But again, he didn't just kind of quit on it. He fought back and played some big moments. So he honourable mention. Still nowhere near enough to get Andrew Lord out of that spot.
No.
As long as we're happy with Jake Morissette in this lineup, rather than up against McRae, Beer-Bryant, and Voth.
So if we still got a spot missing in the last era,
we've got Haddad, Martin, Lord, Morissette, Bentivoglio, and Ulmer as our 6 for this era.
Okay,
and then for the previous era, we've got Hill, Myers, Voth, Beer-Bryant, McRae, and then we can throw in Russ Romanek, Ed Patterson, and Lord and Morissette we would take out. So
I'll throw another one in there. I don't know if, as a devil at the time, maybe not, but Ben Davis qualified.
Yeah, I mean, I've written him down because he qualifies because he was on the world record winning team. I actually think that's maybe one of the reasons we didn't win the league is because when Tyler Michelle got suspended, Ben had already, he was frustrated in not playing, and he wanted to get playing, so he went off to Basingstoke. Had Tyler Michelle been suspended, that was a travesty again in the suspensions. 5 games for
Kalman.
that.
Kalman.
Hey, you had your chance, Frank.
Yeah. I know. We changed the subject, and I never got to go after him for that. But Ben Davis was just so unlucky that Sam Smith had to, happen to create such good chemistry with McRae and Michelle. But I don't think he's done enough as a devil.
Okay, that was my
because you think about he developed through us. Then he went off and did other things in Glasgow and in Guildford and the like, but not enough as a devil. So
I'm quite happy to put my head on the block for the fact of player, captain, winning the Challenge Cup and that difficult first half of season in the big blue tent. I give my vote to Patterson.
Yeah.
Or is this where we get Neil Francis in?
No, 100% not. He does not make anywhere near this all-time team.
I would vote for Franny all day long, but if he's taken himself out of the running. Hubs, I don't think Patterson's going to make the final vote.
No,
I agree with you from the list on the other side, but I would say Ed.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
So we have got one more job to do, and I know this has been a long one. The coaching teams, or coaching / management team. So we have got to there's going to be 2 final choices. So I guess we've got to go with 4 names. John Lawless speaks for itself. The man that created the club, managed the club, coached the club through the early success, and built the foundations to the great club that we've got today.
Franny, can we make special dispensation though that if Lawless doesn't win a vote, he's honorary GM of this team? Because I think maybe he deserves that right.
Let the fans vote, JD.
Fans vote? Really? We're not going to make him honorary GM?
I think he should be, and I think the right outcome will come from the fans.
Okay.
This is a direct threat to the fan base.
Yes.
We all go round to Todd's and plead for one position. I
think his legacy speaks for itself, that you associate the foundations of the Cardiff Devils with John Lawless.
Yeah.
I think he gets in that.
Yeah.
Then you've got...
At this point, even though he outed himself on the last episode as not my friend, and rightly so, do we need to give a special mention to Todd Kelman as an honourable mention as GM?
I don't think he'd want that. He's put it down as a coaching duo. He's asked for coaching duo on this, so I don't think Todd would want that. He's a very humble guy.
Well, I'm going to begrudgingly thank him as bringing trophies back to Cardiff.
Yeah, 100%. Then you've got Paul Heavey, the man that won the Superleague. Went from a good captain into an assistant coach role, into the head coach role, and quite often it's when a club starts falling apart is when their cornerstone goes, and that was Lawless. Heavey took up the reins, and we won the Superleague. That's a great achievement. Then you've got Gerard Adams, who, in the most trying of all the eras and all the situations, he kept us competitive. As a player, he did great things, but as a coach, when you speak to guys that played for G, they loved playing for him. He gave them the freedom to play. He put structure around it, but he trusted his troops to go out and deliver, and they did that. I mean, our budget compared to some of the other ones was nowhere near where we ended up in the league table. We punched above our weight time after time after time. Nobody will ever appreciate how much we did that. We didn't have all the injury replacements the other clubs had. Tough times. G kept us competitive. He kept hockey going in Cardiff, in my opinion. And then we've got the guy who we've already spoke about as the most successful coach of the Devils, who's led the new era, and 9 trophies in 6 seasons or whatever it is. Unbelievable. Andrew Lord. Any other shouts for the coaching positions?
I mean, the only other one that would come close would be Ed, I guess, because he's got a trophy on his CV.
Yeah,
Brian Canawisher would be in front of Ed. I don't think you can look outside those 4.
No.
Yeah. Okay, let's lock those 4 in for the 2 coaching / management positions.
Franny, are you going to run through it from the top now so we can clarify?
Yeah, let's go.
86 to 2021. Where are we?
We've got these are the short list. So we've got Jeff Smith, Jason Wood in goal, Shannon Hope, Stephen Cooper, Paul Heavey, Derek King, Steve Moria, Doug McEwen, Ian Cooper, John Lawless, Nicky Chin, Hilton Ruggles. That's era 1. The second era, known as the Super League era, Stevie Lyle, Derek Kolofsky. On defence, Kip Noble, Mike Ware, Frank Evans, Jason Stone. On forwards, Vezio Sacratini, Ivan Matulak, Steve Thornton, Ian McIntyre, Merv Priest, Doug McCarthy. The third era, so the first ISL era, Phil Ozair and Joseph Myers in goal. Then we've got Gerard Adams, Mark Richardson, Tyson Toplitsky, Tyson Marsh. And as forwards, Phil Hill, Matthew Myers, Ed Patterson, Brad Voth, Max Beerbreyer, Stu McRae. And the new era to present is Ben Bounds, Thomas Murdy, Andrew Hotham, Gleason Fournier, Josh Batch, Mark Lewis, with forwards Joey Haddad, Joey Martin, Andrew Lord, Jake Morissette, Sean Bentivolio, and Lane Ulmer. And our choices for coach shortlisted are John Lawless, Paul Heavey, Gerard Adams, and Andrew Lord.
There are
work,
some
guys.
debates there.
Wow.
What
Good
made-
job, fellas. And it just
Yeah.
goes to show how lucky we've been as a club over the
Absolutely.
years to be
Agreed.
blessed with all these players and all guys. I mean, these are all guys that have been here for at least 3 seasons and won trophies. Some clubs never win trophies. Some clubs never have guys stay for 3 years. And we've got all these great names that are ingrained in Devils history, and they've given so much to our club to make it what it is today. So very well deserved for all those that are in it and all the ones that we mentioned and some we didn't mention, who have contributed to the success of the Devils over the year in some way or another.
And how old do you guys feel? I remember my first game against Bristol Phantoms in 1986, and I saw the article saying 35 years. How old do you guys all feel?
And I'm just annoyed you can remember that far back because I haven't got a clue.
I was there.
Yeah.
First game, Ashfield Islanders, the first home one.
Were you? You were day one?
Yeah,
were you?
I'm day one.
Humberside Seahawks in 1995.
There we go. Wow. That's a mammoth episode, and over
Certainly
to the
is.
fans now. So we'll get some we'll get these out there. I believe the Devils will launch a voting form on the website and then via social media that you can download and then email in. The instructions will be there. We'll have all the side-by-side selections, so you'll get your picks for each era, and the overall votes will be named as our team, a Devils all-time team, with 2 shirts printed. And like I said, I've seen the shirts. These have never been released before. There's something special. We will, where possible, get the player to sign a shirt, one for that winning player, the player that's included in the team to keep, and one to come back for us to, I don't know whether it's auction or raffle or something, but there'll be an opportunity for fans to get their hands on these jerseys, which will be very, very unique.
And I think we're going to put our selections up prior to the voting, I believe, gentlemen.
Our
think we're
personal
not-
selections. Yeah.
Yeah, put our head above the parapet. And
Yeah. We'll get our campaigns going.
I was going to say
there's a lot of campaign.
we're going against each other. We're campaigning to win. So
Oh, absolutely.
may the best man win.
Yeah. And now producer Hubs has got a hell of a job to do to get clips of every single player that's been nominated.
Yeah, this one might not have one.
Great episode, guys. Enjoyed that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Indeed, it's been a long one. We'll be back with an update on how the voting's going, and we'll lock in a few more guests, I guess. We're chugging along nicely here on Behind the Bench, and thank you all for your support and for listening to the episodes. We've had our biggest listenership since we've come back, so thank you very, very much for that. They've been pearlers of episodes, to be honest, and if you manage to get to the end of this Ben Hur edition, then you deserve some form of medal as well. With apologies to Jeff Begard and Nathan Rempel, Gareth Hewish,
And to Rick Brabant.
I've been joined by Mr. John Donovan.
Great episode, guys. Really enjoyed it. And just to echo Franny's point, even with some downs along the way, what a great 35 years it's been.
And I've been joined by Mr. Neil Francis.
Yeah, echo all that. It's good to look back and remember so many fantastic servants to the club.
Producer Herbs, can you please hit play on Brass Bonanza? It's what everyone's been waiting for.